Stories shape how we see the world. Voice of Witness is an award-winning oral history nonprofit harnessing the transformative power of storytelling. We work with individuals and communities impacted by injustice, helping them document their lived experiences through oral history, telling their own stories in their own words. In an era of reductive sound bites, we need this kind of nuanced grassroots storytelling to create a more just future. Visit voiceofwitness.org/learn to get involved, check out our workshops, and download tools to support your own project. Join us in building a more connected world, one story at a time.
Hi, I'm Rashmi Sajani, founder of Girls Who Code. Look, I'd consider myself a pretty successful adult woman. I've written books, founded 2 successful nonprofits, and I'm raising 2 incredible kids. But here's the thing. I still wake up wondering, is this it? And if the best years are yet to come, when's that going to start? Join me on My So-Called Midlife, my new podcast with Lemonada Media, where we're building a playbook for navigating midlife, one episode at a time. Each week, I'll chat with extraordinary guests who've transformed their midlife crisis into opportunities for growth and newfound purpose. At some point, we all ask ourselves, is there more to life? I'm here to discover how to thrive in my second act, right alongside you. My So-Called Midlife is out now, wherever you get your podcasts.
Lemonada. Hello and welcome to Good Things. I'm your host, Gloria Riviera. In this episode, we are talking about the future of work. And by the future, I don't mean AI and robots, although that is certainly part of it. What we will cover today is the future of how we take care of contract workers and ensuring they can earn a living wage in safe conditions. Adrian Haro has been with the Workers Lab since 2017, when he started as managing director. The Workers Lab is a national home for worker-centered innovation in the U.S. They do a lot of listening to workers, hearing their frustrations about the benefits they are not receiving and how those benefits would change their lives, and more. Adrian's energy is infectious. We were laughing together right from the start, bonding over our shared history of bagging groceries as our first job, although he held more prestigious titles than I did in that role. You will hear all about that. We then quickly got down to business, the business of improving work for low-paid employees, and what Adrian coined during the interview as those in the excluded workers economy. I love that term. The gig economy is another commonly heard way to describe the sector. What I'm thinking of now, just after the interview ended, is that one very simple starting point for us all is simply to be more aware. If you are listening to this podcast, you have an interest in those who, for others, can seem invisible in their jobs. And yet, whether it is your Uber driver or the person who paints your door or helps you with all those jobs listed on TaskRabbit, these people have skills and talents and are needed, and those things and others make them valuable human beings. So let's treat them that way. Adrian has a terrifically positive energy about him. Thank goodness, because we need that in order to radically renovate what working life in this country offers to all those who hold it up every day. Here's Adrian Haro from the Workers Lab. Hi, thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
I'm ridiculously excited to talk about what it is that you do. I am so fascinated, and I understand, I feel like one iota of this endeavor, and that one iota is really exciting, but I want to understand as much as I can over the course of this interview. So my first question, Adrian, is what was your first summer job or job in general?
Oh my gosh. I don't remember which one came first. I'm a longtime workaholic, I'm afraid. I'm working on that. So I had I think my first job was actually multiple jobs.
How old were you?
I was probably like 14 or 15. I worked as a bagger at the local grocery store at a Ralph's. I grew up in Los Angeles, California.
Oh, you're looking at a fellow grocery bagger here. And it takes a lot of effort for me. The person who trained me taught me about building my sidewalls in the grocery bag, like in a paper bag.
With the 2 cereal boxes, and then everything else goes in the middle.
Boxes, exactly. Oh my God, it's universal.
Girl, I was, I don't know, I think I was customer service representative of the month all the time. How about you?
Well, I mean, you had to throw that out there. That I cannot also claim. So,
oh my God, we're already kindred spirits.
I know,
by virtue of our bagging background. So I did that job, and then at the same time, I worked a few hours a week at the local teachers union, stuffing envelopes and making copies, that kind of thing, and also at the same time worked at our church rectory, Catholic church rectory, and did counted the money from all the people all the contributions from the last Sunday.
Gosh, you were responsible. Wow. And busy.
Yeah. But no, I guess responsible. Yeah. I was a huge, nerd, obsessed with being involved and service way back then. A little too intense, I think, for some place like the east side of Los Angeles. But now that I look back on it, but formative. And I still think about those experiences today, for sure, as we all do, I think, for first jobs type of influences.
For sure. And I like when I go to my grocery store, I can bag. I always prefer, because I'm like, I actually do know what I'm doing.
Yeah. Hey, it works best. It works. I know the climate people are going to come for me maybe, but it works best with the paper bag. Because you can.
Right. I know. That's what it was designed. That's what the instruction manual was designed for, was the paper bag.
Agreed.
Well, so did you see other people around you in your immediate family or circle of friends working equally as hard as you were working?
Harder. Yeah, harder. I grew up in a small little suburb of East Los Angeles, on the east side of Los Angeles, called Pico Rivera. And this is a town of predominantly Mexican people, Chicanos, very specifically. And back then, 90s kid, this was a town of, Northrop Grumman, big plants when manufacturing was still like a big thing. Northrop Grumman was here. There was a Ford plant here. And so, you think about those kinds of jobs, really good lifetime jobs that came with health benefits, pension, vacation time, all that stuff. So you had this really interesting thing going on in Pico Rivera at that time, where you had a bunch of people speaking broken English, in brown bodies with health benefits. It really, and like going on vacation and raising families and going to church and doing all that stuff. I grew up around all that. And that's, I think, what's her name from CNN a long time ago? Soledad O'Brien. I think that's her name. Did a story on Pico Rivera, called it the Latino Mayberry, I think is what she called it. Because it really was that. My God.
That is a good title.
Yeah.
The Latino Mayberry. Wow.
Yeah. And so, yeah, I mean, I grew up around all of that. People working really, really hard. Of course, my parents, my mom, I just wrote about her in something the other day. She's my best friend. And she, like many immigrants, right, from Mexico, built what still is around today, the town's cleaners. And I live here again now. She built that business. So I've seen, all the challenges, but most inspired today by the creativity that the people in these kinds of towns have. Low wage working people of color, I believe, are the most creative builders this country has. And, it informs everything I do at the Workers Lab, believe it or not. And feel really grateful to have grown up here, and also to be back here living here now again. It's a great place.
Yeah. What were those challenges that you saw and remember from your young adulthood?
Oh God, yeah, I mean, I think, I'll just speak for myself and then my parents, which are the closest frames of reference I have to that kind of stuff myself. Like I said, I was weird. I was a weird kid for this little town. I really was. My dreams were big. I used to say ambitious things, and I was gay. I didn't know that back then, but I knew I was different, and I knew I was special, and I was going places. God knows I told everybody. And that ambition was different for this kind of town, which is, the goal was to come here and stay and to build a life that was better than somewhere else. And so I didn't want to do any of that. I wanted to go to Washington, D.C. and change the world. And so I was intense. Yeah, I was intense and so all those challenges, right? As a kid in this kind of town, just being really different. I think my parents, right? Like, I think I really saw, my mom, building a very small business, all those challenges there. My dad, God bless him, had, I was a mistake kid for a long time before the majority of his career was, he used to cut dress patterns before everything was done digitally in downtown LA. And he was the manager of like a fashion, like they would make patterns for dresses on paper. And he like managed that operation. It's how my mom used to be a seamstress there. And that's how they fell in love and all that. But I would say right when I went to college, like my last year of high school, that job was shipped overseas. And like many jobs at that time, those kinds of jobs were being either replaced by technology or moved away.
Yeah, disappeared.
Yeah. And so I had this really unique experience where, like, for the majority of my childhood, I really was experiencing, it feels so almost naughty to say the words American dream today, but I did have that, I was the recipient of that. And then we had it like literally ripped out from under us. And did all that and watched my dad go from being the manager to doing he was already in his early, I think, late 50s, early 60s. The only job that would take him at that point was as a janitor at a local school district here. And I think a lot of folks would probably think that a janitor's job, a cleaner's job is a low, dirty job. But for us, I mean, it was more about what that job represented, which was, it was at a school district. And so it came with health benefits and union membership, and it really saved our lives. And watching my dad, just the shame of being really at the top and then having to clean classrooms at night. I don't know. I really respect him for that. I can't imagine, right? And like, doing everything that he could to take care of us. And so all those challenges that, I think, just in that one story reflect, I think, really the evolution of the economy, of the nature of work, since the 1970s up until now, which, I would argue have, not been great for workers, good for, and so, all those challenges wrapped into one childhood and one life that, I think about a lot and certainly have learned from.
Yeah.
God knows. Yeah.
How is the change that you want to create different from the quality jobs as your parents defined them? Does that question make sense?
I think so. Yeah. I've learned a lot. I think when I got to the Workers Lab, and God certainly taking the helm from our founder, who's fabulous. I didn't know the answer to that question. Honestly, I wish I did. I just knew that, in addition to making quality jobs in this country, I have learned and am now convinced, and almost, if you ask my team, hellbent on, preaching, making work also quality, in this country. I don't think it's in our culture. I don't think it's in the discourse. I don't think most people know that the major federal labor laws in this country exclude millions, have always excluded millions of low wage workers, right? We, call that the gig economy, called it the excluded workers economy, whatever.
Ooh, excluded workers economy. I haven't heard that phraseology yet. I've only heard gig economy, which I had to research. So excluded workers economy. That's interesting.
Yeah, which has, gig economy has a sort of tech Uber sort of tinge to it. But I'll tell you this, the Uber driver and the cleaner or domestic worker and the sex worker and the artist all are up against the same kind of exclusion that is rooted in sexism and racism baked into the major federal labor laws of this country from the 1930s,
Oh, God,
right?
this is what I want to learn so much about. So,
okay, yeah.
Okay, let's do it. So I'm going to start with a very simple, short question. Our research showed that, one stat we came across was that something like 44% of employed workers in the US have quality jobs. And the question I immediately had is, why isn't that number higher? But after listening to you, how do we define quality is where I want to start, somewhere very simple.
Yeah, I think, so it's a few things. So we define it, safety, health, security, financial security, power.
Power.
Going back to what I told you about how I really have learned a lot. It was all those things. It was all those things, right? When I got here. And then as we have really zeroed in on where we think as the Workers Lab, we can be the most helpful, where worker-centered innovation can be most helpful, which is inside the gig economy. I'm almost convinced now, because there's relatively nothing there at scale anyway. We've added to that, to our definition of quality job, work, whatever, flexibility. And that's because workers have told us that it's really important to them, and that they like it. Now, they don't like it as a trade-off for things like health insurance. They like it as an addendum, or in addition to things like the traditional things that we would consider quality.
Right. And let's be clear, not a benefit, right? I mean, that's me not having read anything about that, but my sense from speaking to countless caregivers, specifically early educators, is that the flexibility, actually, that's not a really good example because they have very little flexibility unless they work part-time. But what I want to do is be clear about how flexibility is seen, because I think it's shifted clearly from the pandemic. And it's not seen as a benefit in my mind. What's your take on that?
I think increasingly, if you talk to workers, which we do a lot, and particularly these excluded workers, gig workers, whatever billing makes most sense to you, I don't know. I don't know if it's a benefit or if it's I'll just tell you, it's high on the priority list. Yeah. Really high. It's up there with healthcare. It's up there with, it's really, really, really important. But I will say for myself, Adrian speaking, I think, I don't think it's a benefit. I think particularly post-pandemic, like, my God, for women of color, low wage women of color, who are single moms, who can't, for some it's a necessity, who cannot work in a 9-to-5 because they're busy. And they need to take care of their children, pick them up. It's just, so if the people in power in this country who are making decisions about workers want to create a future of work, that reflects the reality of what workers are experiencing now post-pandemic, we absolutely have to go into the direction of designing around what they're telling us, which is that they want all the things we know are good for workers, but they are also wanting flexibility.
We're going to take a quick break, but we will be right back with more on Good Things.
Interested in the power of first-person storytelling? The Voice of Witness book series documents the oral histories of people directly impacted by and fighting against injustice. Each collection supports historically excluded communities to tell their own stories in their own words. The books feature a diversity of voices, including those of refugees and immigrants, incarcerated people, communities displaced from public housing, farm workers, indigenous peoples, and more. These powerful stories highlight crucial issues and expose the impacts of harmful narratives and policies, laying the groundwork to build solidarity and movements for change. Voice of Witness books are read and used by thousands of educators, organizations, and advocates across the country each year. Visit voiceofwitness.org/read to learn more, access free resources, and get involved. Want more from your favorite Lemonada Media podcasts while supporting the shows that help make life suck less? Subscribe to Lemonada Premium today. As a subscriber, you'll unlock exclusive bonus content like never-before-heard interviews, behind-the-scenes moments, bonus episodes, and so much more. It's easy to sign up no matter what podcast app you use. On Apple, you can just click the Lemonada logo in the Apple Podcast app and hit subscribe. For all other podcast apps, head to lemonada.supportingcast.fm to subscribe. That's lemonada.supportingcast.fm.
When people hear flexibility, and I'm sitting in Washington, D.C., so
Oh my God!
This is a
Are
guess,
you shaking?
but I mean, I've been shaking. Yes, I'm always shaking to some degree.
Okay, yeah.
But I read something in which someone who does have flexibility, and recognized, the struggles with the unpredictable schedule and finances, but also said, I can be the most I've ever been myself in any job. And that sounds pretty good. That doesn't sound like it applies to all of those in the excluded workers economy. I'm going to go with that phrase because I really like it. But it does, it does help me understand that there is an upside to being able to pick and choose. There's a power in that for the worker.
Oh, 110%. My God. Listen, I think when I talk about, because in the excluded, let's go back to the excluded economy term, which honestly, I'm not lying. I made it up on this. I don't know if it's right or wrong or whatever.
You're
but
hearing
I made
it now
up
for the first time, listeners. You heard it here first.
No, it's serious. I've heard the term excluded workers before, but never excluded economy. Anyway, the workers that I am most passionate about helping in that part of the economy are the excluded workers or the gig workers who are, low wage, really trying to make it. Because also in that group, I would say, one could make a really good argument that solo, high-priced consultants fall into that bucket, right? But they're doing just fine. But to get to your question, the big difference for me in that consultant profile and an Uber driver or a farm worker or whatever, they do have flexibility. They do have actual flexibility. They have agency. They have decision-making authority over what clients they're going to take on, who they work for, their rate, all of that stuff. When you get down into the lower parts of that gig economy, particularly in the platform gig economy, which is robotic, algorithmic, it gets dicey. This person needs a ride. That's it. Period. The end. We need to create in this country a model for good gig work for those workers so that they truly have flexibility, but also agency and control over when they work, for whom, for how much, when, all of that. And I'm really proud that we're doing that at the Workers Lab because it's needed.
Yeah, and we will get there, and I want to hear all about it. But I think it's being clarified for me as you answer, which is that we're talking about workers with an absence of agency.
Yes.
That's the population that we're talking about. So that's a downside of gig work. What are the other downsides?
So if you are a true gig worker, like you do work on a 1099, as opposed to a W-2, you are, because of those two major labor laws, federal labor laws that I mentioned, by and large in this country, right? Like those, you are excluded from all of the benefits, rights, protections that you would get working at a desk at a 9 to 5, right? So think about things like workers' comp, minimum wage, which hasn't been raised nationally since, I don't know, I think 2007 or 2008. Anti-discrimination laws, paid time off, all those things that culturally we have become accustomed to, maybe even take it for granted. They don't apply to you. And so think about safety protections, safeguards, all of that stuff. Think about what that does to somebody. Talk about, quality. I mean, safe, healthy, secure, have power. You have very little. And so I think those are the major downsides of this part of the economy. But, depends on how you look at it. Some days I wake up and I'm like, God in heaven, this is, and it is not great for workers. But on the other side of the coin, it's like, wow, okay, so this is where innovation is really needed, where there's nothing.
Right.
And so there's a ton of opportunity as well.
Yeah. Yeah. And I love that. We always love to be positive when we take on these very difficult topics. In fact, Lemonada's motto is we try to make life suck less. And so we like to talk about all the places we can make life suck less. But getting back to the downsides, you mentioned a 9 to 5 W-2, like a traditional job. Even if you have that traditional job, you're still going to deal with some of the same downsides because, I see across industries a move away from, as you said, the Mayberry ideal of being at one company for a long time and, contributing towards your own retirement. The list just goes on and on and on. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So that's not great, but there's a lot of room for innovation. Mm-hmm. I also want to ask, how do all of the downsides affect the most vulnerable groups, like formerly incarcerated people, immigrants? What happens to that particular subset?
Yeah, I think I don't want to speak for workers, right? But based on what we have learned directly from them, which check all of those boxes by and large, I'm going to give you a weird answer. If you think about, let's take the example of an undocumented person, a person who's been formerly incarcerated, somebody who's experiencing a disability, all of those groups, you've got a problem in the W-2 world. You do. You just do. And so for the first two, the formerly incarcerated, the undocumented, for example, you're not allowed in many cases to work in a formal economy. And so on a W-2. So in many ways, what I think the press and the culture, the national discourse doesn't hear a lot about is that actually for some workers who have backgrounds or whatever, gig work is their only option. And so it just continues to buttress and support our perspective and our vantage point that, like, for the least among us, those who need our help the most, who need a leg up, it's even more important to rally energy, enthusiasm, resources around a vision for making gig work good work in the United States.
I love that sentence, gig work, good work. So that brings us directly to the organization you run and the work that you are leading. Oh. One of the things, you have a smile on your face. I just want listeners to know, with that exhale, there was a smile.
I get nervous. I don't, the word leader,
okay.
was always scared me. So is expert, but it scared me to death. But, it's true, I guess. Yeah.
I hope you are not scared, but in this one-on-one, you are the expert. So just accept that.
All right, Gloria.
And tell me about your work. Tell me about the new ideas you have to give that leg up to those who need it the most. How does that happen?
Oh, God. Well, It happens first and foremost by listening to workers themselves. This Workers Lab is comprised almost entirely of first generation queer people of color. And that's pretty cool to say in this day and age. But it's really important, particularly given the nature of our work, which is innovation, which we define as giving life to new ideas, very specifically for and with workers, worker-centered innovation, because the innovation for workers that currently exists in this country, I would argue, on the whole, is not for workers. I mean, Uber, for example, is an innovation for workers and work. It just hasn't turned out to be a particularly good one. And so we lean on literally workers driving an Uber car, domestic workers, freelancers, sex workers, you name it. They're all invited to our party to inform a new era of generation, really, that is centered on them, on their struggles, on their challenges, and actually their ideas. I go back to the beginning, which is not a line, right? Like, I believe because of my mother that immigrants, low-wage working people of color are some of the most creative people out there. They should absolutely be involved in any process for innovation that's aimed at workers, so that innovation, be it a law, policy, program, service, piece of technology, is actually from the get designed to help workers and their families instead of harm them. And we're on a mission to make that happen.
How do you do it with a vision of what work will look like in the future?
Imagine a world where all of the stuff that we know works in the way of building power for workers, organizing, collective bargaining, union membership. Add to that strategy a well-resourced, well-funded movement for what we call worker-centered innovation. I think in that future, workers are doing pretty good, because not only are you fixing what we know, you're imagining, planning for, designing around what we don't know for workers yet. That is where people with money, power, venture capital firms, Silicon Valley have got us beat, is on creativity, new ideas, ideation, all of that, revenue generation, right? All of those things at the Workers Lab, absolutely in the toolbox for building power for workers in this country. I wish it were ubiquitous. And I hope that one day we can make it that way. But I would say the work for us is making sure that the powers that be in and around the labor movement understand that innovation for and with workers is just as important and necessary as the tools that we already know and have known worked for building power for workers.
Let me give you one example, and you can tell me if I'm near the right path. So I care passionately about caregivers and early education. And one thing that a lot of teachers come up against is certification, right? To go get certified so that you can become a certified teacher, obviously for public schools, but also within privately owned early education centers that are running all over this country. And I love the idea of family care as well, where there are far less certifications. But something that a lot of educators have told me is they want to change the certification requirements because they spend time with people, they see how they are with the children, they find people they'd like to fast track to be certified. But it does seem like an innovative idea to me to redesign, rethink what certification means. Does that fall under the umbrella of what you're thinking about at the Workers Lab?
Yes, because if you think about unequivocally, yes, who came up with the certification? Probably somebody who's never worked in a low-wage job or knows anything about it. I may be wrong about that, but I would bet if I were in Vegas. And so the entire apparatus around credentials is really old and likely really exclusive. So when I talk about innovation and making things for workers more modern and more inclusive, credentialing fits the bill almost perfectly. We did, and it does apply to gig workers, actually. We just last year, and we're going to put out a report in July, where we tested, we brought workers in to develop a piece of technology that would give local workforce boards, local cities, the ability to make local gig work good in their communities, right? So think about, have you ever used TaskRabbit?
Oh, I've heard of TaskRabbit. I think I've tried once or twice. Yes.
Think about a pro worker version of TaskRabbit, right? So like that's housed in something like one of America's fabulous job centers, whereby that job center has now the technology to be able to schedule scheduling gigs, but also becomes a de facto employer of record, right? That is holding down a W-2, a bunch of gig work just in smaller slices on a W-2.
Yeah.
And all the data, right? So the local worker has all of their skills, all of their past experiences, all of everything, in one platform, in one place. What we learned there is when you get down to reality, and you're talking to what local employers, be them families, aquariums, whatever, when they are looking at like the credentials that they need, the skills that they need, anything can be a credential. A credential could be I'm a non-smoker, which is incredibly important if you're talking about very local domestic work. A credential be like, I know how to work on a boat, which in a city like Long Beach, California is really, really important. We have actually been thinking about that a lot because we need to recreate it. If in fact we're designing to the workers and the fact that they are incredibly complex people with a number of different skills and talents, the skills and talents thing is such an elite like 9-to-5 thing. People in this lower rung of the economy, right, have so much talent and have so much skill. And why wouldn't we formalize that? Why wouldn't we create an entirely new paradigm for credentialing in this country that works for all workers in the country?
Okay, sit tight, everyone. We're going to take one more quick break, and we'll be right back with more good things.
Want a sneak preview of hot new audiobooks? Then check out Your Next Listen, a new podcast from Lemonada Media and Simon & Schuster Audio. We've got everything. The hottest new thrillers, best-selling celebrity memoirs, and swoony romances. And these aren't tiny clips either. They're entire chapters you can listen to. Your Next Listen is out November 11th, wherever you get your podcasts.
Hi, I'm Emily Deschanel.
And I'm Carla Gallo, and we're excited to tell you about Boneheads, our new Bones rewatch podcast.
I played Dr. Temperance Brennan.
And I played Daisy Wick, and we are going to watch from the very beginning.
We're going to watch the episodes. We're going to reminisce. We're going to laugh. We're going to cry. We're going to tell behind-the-scenes stories.
We're going to go on tangents.
A lot of tangents.
So whether you're a seasoned Bones fanatic or a newcomer looking to dip your toes in to the wild world of forensic anthropology, this show is for you.
Boneheads from Lemonada Media is out now wherever you get your podcasts.
Right now, it looks so, to me, it looks broken. And I'm thinking of my sister needing help moving out of storage. And she knew the corner where majority men would gather in the morning and wait for a job like that. Mm-hmm. And it's like, how do you know which corner to go to and how? And of course, no benefits, right? It's somebody looking for some help. If that can be revolutionized to benefit the worker as much as that work they provide is benefiting the employer, it would be an entirely different scenario. I mean, am I naive or am I?
No.
Okay.
No, you're exciting. I'm getting excited.
I'm excited. I am excited.
No, because I think
that is true.
I think what you're getting at is like, And I come from government and politics, right? Like I love all of my friends over there. When government is at its best, it is one step ahead of the thing that we're talking about right now, right? Like this is the government. This is what workforce development people should be doing. Their job is to serve and to help people find work regardless of who they are, their backgrounds. But we also have, going back to how do you get to the future? In the workforce, you've got a piece of a law, an old law, WIOA. It's the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act. That law does not incentivize local workforce leaders to serve anybody working outside of the 9-to-5 paradigm. That's crazy to me. That is really crazy.
Does it drive you crazy? Again, this is a question coming from Washington, D.C. We hear politicians talk about the employment rate, the unemployment rate. Now that I've had this conversation with you, I feel like there's a reason I'm not doing your job, because it would drive me crazy to hear politicians talk about employment numbers, unemployment numbers, because it doesn't seem inclusive. They're talking about a different...
It's not.
It's not. Okay, good.
Not.
Maybe I will come over there and apply for a job. Yeah, it feels like
you should. Yeah.
That's not what we're not talking about. I mean, all the power to everyone who is lucky enough to have a job that makes them feel empowered, but what about everybody else? And it's not very innovative or full of opportunity, is it? It's not.
Yeah, it is so bad. Yeah, it's old. But going back to the jobs numbers and how all that data is measured and then collected. BLS, the measurement tools and instruments that this country uses to collect data from workers, right? Demographics, wages, everything. By and large, again, designed around a traditional 9-to-5 model of work. We are literally missing out on hearing from and learning from probably millions of workers who are doing work in this country, who are generating economic activity, all that stuff. But we literally don't know who they are, where they live, how much they make, all of that stuff, which is why the focus at the Workers Lab has been around learning more directly from those workers, because it's a huge gap in what we know about who workers are and what they want and need.
So what can we do? What is your advice going forward one thing that I'm taking away is be aware and have conversations. I love that the Workers Lab does so much talking to and listening to workers. And I feel like that's one simple takeaway. I feel like the more in conversation we can all be with, you mentioned the excluded workers economy. It makes me also think of the workers that many people don't acknowledge, right? That we missed, that the pandemic put into Technicolor because we couldn't, guess what, survive.
Yeah. Yeah. You asked me the question and then you answered it. That's exactly right. I think if you're anybody in this country, it's not hard. It's not hard to talk to workers, right? Like, I think even more if you're a service provider, a policymaker, an employer, talking to workers is the single best. Being in proximity to workers, acknowledging, respecting their voices of what they have to say on everything from policy to technology, is the greatest tool that we have to make sure that the future of work is one that helps workers and their families instead of harming them, right? Because I think when you talk to workers like we do, they tell it's straight. There's no, how are you going to argue with that? I guess you could, but it wouldn't be good. In addition to that, you design infrastructure, everything, is designed in ways that's supposed to be modern and inclusive. Consumers, the general public, absolutely have a role to play in the enterprise of building power for workers in this country. And I hope that one day, we'll get there. We used to be there, there was a time in this country where we were. But it is I I don't know how you get people excited about you got to get people excited about work, all of that stuff in this country, because they're just, I would say at scale, not. And, workers are, I think in this culture, low and dirty and annoying, and, they're anything but.
Well, I'll tell you one thing that I noted, and that was when I realized that my Uber driver could also give me a review. And it really changed my experience, because I thought, wait a minute, I want a high rating. And this two-way street with someone who did not have a lot of autonomy in who they picked up, right? And someone who did not have a lot of power in their own job. I don't know. It was a very interesting moment when I thought, oh, wait, I'm being evaluated too for how I treat this person as a human being who is doing a job that I desperately need in this moment.
Yeah.
Right. There's something in there that needs to be communicated to anyone who interacts with anyone in the gig economy.
Yeah. It's such an interesting point, because that driver, the lawyers are fighting this out in, a lot of states across the country. But right now, that person does not have an employer. So who is that you in the back seat? Who is on the hook for making them feel safe and giving them a good tip or whatever, right?
Yeah.
There's a lot of room here for consumers and for the culture, to get behind the people who help us literally like every single day now,
Yeah, it is every day. Adrian, I want to say thank you so much for your time today.
God. We're out of time already.
I wish we could go on. I do want to take it back just before we wrap. I was so struck. It's still with me, the story of your father and that transition that he made between being a manager to being the janitor. And it just, as we were talking about TaskRabbit, which is, an online platform to go seek gig workers, paint a room, help move some furniture, whatever it was. I just wonder what your reflections are now when you think about the skills and talents that he had and how he maneuvered to the job that would provide him with some benefits, whereas the job he held for a long time, it was the job for someone living in a Mayberry.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think, I should say this. I don't know if it's allowed, but it's the truth. About the first thing I thought about is in my family, we are people of faith. I left the church for a while. I like to say I left the church to become gay, and now I've come all the way back to it now that I need God.
Right.
And I would say that the same is like, our faith was really helpful there, especially for my dad. But I would say to you what I said at the top. Parents like mine have done, vastly harder things. That was hard for him. But I have to imagine, the process of coming to this country, was a lot harder and a lot scarier. So I think, when I say that these people, these kinds of people who are my people, are the most, notice I'm using the word creative. They know how to figure things out.
Yeah.
They do. They know how to figure things out. And, that's why we need them at the innovation table always.
Adrian, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you for listening to Good Things. This episode is presented by the Marguerite Casey Foundation. This series is produced by associate producer Donnie Matias. Our supervising producer is Jamila Zara Williams. Mixing and sound design by Noah Smith. Steve Nelson is our SVP of Weekly Content. Executive producers are Stephanie Whittles-Wax and Jessica Cordova-Kramer. Help others find our show by leaving us a rating and writing a review. Thanks so much for listening. See you next week. Follow Good Things wherever you get your podcasts and listen ad-free on Amazon Music with your Prime membership. Hi, everyone. Gloria Riviera here, and we are back for another season of No One is Coming to Save Us, a podcast about America's childcare crisis. This season, we're delving deep into 5 critical issues facing our country through the lens of childcare: poverty, mental health, housing, climate change, and the public school system. By exploring these connections, we aim to highlight that childcare is not an isolated issue, but one that influences all facets of American life. Season 4 of No One is Coming to Save Us is out now wherever you get your podcasts.
Are you looking for ways to make your everyday life happier, healthier, more productive, and more creative? I'm Gretchen Rubin, the #1 best-selling author of The Happiness Project, bringing you fresh insights and practical solutions in the Happier with Gretchen Rubin podcast. My co-host and happiness guinea pig is my sister, Elizabeth Kraft.
That's me, Elizabeth Kraft, a TV writer and producer in Hollywood. Join us as we explore ideas and hacks about cultivating happiness and good habits.
Check out Happier with Gretchen Rubin from Lemonada Media.